Dear students, today I am going to tell you a story of a noble mother. She is Mrs. Addis. Section 1, prose number 1.5 in your textbook. This is written by an English novelist and poet, Sheila K. Smith. Children, please open at page number 44. Story Mrs. Addis. First, let us be introduced to the characters of the story. Mrs. Addis, a hard-working lady of around 42 years, of a peasant family, of a farmer community, with hard face, dry skin, with lots of wrinkles. Tom, son, her only son, a loving son. Peter Crouch, a friend of Tom. Beadler, keeper of a fort, Scotney Castle. The Boormans and Old Crouch. Children, let me tell you, Tom and Peter Crouch studied together in National School at Lamberhurst, and since then their friendship had not been broken by their very different characters and careers. That means they had very good friendship even though they had many differences. Mrs. Addis lived in her cottage in the agricultural district of Sussex. Sussex is a county in the south of England. County is an area of Britain that has its own government. The story starts. The first paragraph. In northeast Sussex, a great tongue of land runs into Kent. It is a land of woods, the old hammer woods of the Sussex, iron industry, and among the woods gleam the hammer ponds. Owing to the thickness of the woods, the road that passes Mrs. Addis's cottage is dark long before the fields beyond. That night there was no twilight or no moon, only a few pricks of fire in the black sky above the trees. So, children, it is a land of woods, the old hammer woods of the Sussex iron industry, and among the woods gleam the hammer ponds. Here, wood means forest. Hammer woods, it is named so because here was iron industry in the past. Iron used to be made using timber or wooden bar of the big trees in the forest and still water from the pond nearby. It was a thick forest. Many trees were there. There was a road in the wood that passes Mrs. Addis's cottage. The road was very dark due to the thickness of the woods. Children, this is the story of a night. Dark night. That was a dark night, no twilight, no moonlight, only a few pricks of fire. What a beautiful expression of the writer. A few pricks of fire means some stars in the black sky above the trees. Understood? And in this absolute stillness of the night, windless night, every sound was distinct, intensified, very clear, very powerful. Even the distant bark of a dog at Delmonden sounded close at hand. In that silent night, a man was walking on the road alone, leaving behind the forest. He was walking very fast, with long footsteps. Second paragraph. Every now and then he made an effort to go more quietly, but the roadside was a mass of thorns. These bushes on the roadside made him go slowly, and he had no time. He had no time to walk slowly. The man was in a hurry to walk through the road. Third paragraph. While walking, he came to the cottage of Mrs. Addis. He stopped there. Her cottage is just beside the road. He saw a window. There was no curtain. He saw through the window Mrs. Addis. She was working in the kitchen, stooping means bending over the fire, taking some pot or kettle off the fire. It seemed she was about to cook food in the kitchen. He thought of entering her cottage, but how to enter? Through the window or through the door? He was a working man, not much clean in appearance. He hesitated to enter, but went to the door without knocking. He walked straight in the kitchen. Mrs. Addis heard of his footsteps and turned round quickly. Mrs. Addis exclaimed, "What, you, Peter Crouch? Now? I did not hear you knock." Page number 45, children. Just read the conversation. The man said, "I did not knock, ma'am. I did not want anybody to hear the knock. So I entered your house silently." Mrs. Addis was more surprised. She asked, "How is that? Why did you enter silently?" The man said, "Ma'am, I am in trouble." He was trembling in fear. His hands were shaking. "I am in trouble, ma'am," he said. Mrs. Addis asked in anxiety, "What have you done?" The man replied, I shot a man, Mrs. Addis." Mrs. Addis was shocked. "You? Did you shoot someone?" The man answered, "Yes, ma'am, I shot him." Mrs. Addis asked, "Did you kill him?" The man replied, "I don't know whether he's killed, but I shot him." For a moment, there was silence in the small, stuffy kitchen. Then the kettle boiled over. Hearing that sound, Mrs. Addis mechanically put it at the side of the fire. Then she asked the man, sourly means very unpleasantly, "What do you want me to do for you, Peter Crouch?" That means, "Peter Crouch, what do you want me to do for you, as you have come to me now?" Peter Crouch said, "Let me stay here a bit. Is there nowhere you can put me till they have gone? Please, madam, allow me to stay here for some time till they leave this place. Can you put me somewhere in your house, please?" Mrs. Addis asked, "Who are they? Who are you referring to?" Peter Crouch answered, "They are the keepers." Keepers means guards. They are the guards of of a castle, of a fort. Mrs. Addis asked, "Oh, you have had a quarrel with the keepers, have you? Have you quarrelled with the keepers?" Peter Crouch said, "Yes, madam. I was down by Cinderwood, the forest, for finding something for me, and I saw 4 persons to follow me. They were chasing me. I was just alone. I was fearful and used my gun to shoot, to protect me. Then I ran to save me. They are after me. They cannot be far away. They are not far off now. They are nearby only. And they are in search for me, I am sure. They are in search for me. Please, you help me, Mrs. Addis. Give me a shelter for some time. Protect me." Mrs. Addis was puzzled. She was in a fix. What to do now? She could not speak for a moment. Peter Crouch looked at her beseechingly. Children, it may be a new word to you. Beseechingly means appealingly, with a hope for her kindness. Now, page number 46. "You might do it for Tom's sake," he said. See the first line. "You might do it for Tom's sake," he said. Who is he? Peter Crouch. "You have not been an over good friend to Tom," snapped Mrs. Addis. Mrs. Addis replied that you were not that much good friend of Tom. I suppose you have not been an over good friend to Tom. Peter, you were not that much good friend of Tom. But madam, Tom has been a very good friend to me. He would want you to stand by me, to support me tonight. Mrs. Addis agreed to give Peter Crouch rest in her cottage, just because Tom, her son, always thought of his friend's well-being. She said, Tom always thought better of you than you deserved. Maybe you can stay till Tom returns tonight, then we can hear what Tom says about your stay here. We shall hear Tom's opinion about your shelter in our house. Peter Crouch said, Tom's duty hour will be over within an hour. The sea coast will be clear by then, and I can get away out of the country. I shall leave this country soon after having met Tom. Mrs. Addis asked him curiously, But Peter Crouch, where will you go? Where will you go, Peter? Peter answered, I myself don't know where to go. There is time to think of that. I shall think over this, Mrs. Addis. Mrs. Addis then opened a door at the back of the cottage. There was a small shed attached to the kitchen, and told Peter very dryly, very not interestingly, that be here and think of your place to go. Peter Crouch was relaxed getting the place to stay. He expressed his gratitude in his words. You are a good woman, Mrs. Addis. I know I am not worth your standing by me, but maybe I would have been different if I had a mother like Tom's mother. I know that I do not deserve your warm protection, and I did it wrong, but still you are just giving me shelter. You are thinking of my safety, my security. Great you are, Mrs. Addis. I too would have been good like your son Tom had I got you as my mom, as my mother in my life. Mrs. Addis heard of this, but she did not speak. She just shut the door from outside, and Peter Crouch was in darkness in the shed. There were many cracks on the wall of the shed. He got a small ray of light that came through one of the cracks of the wall. By this light, he could see her moving in the kitchen preparing Tom's supper. Tom worked every day in iron latch farm. Peter Crouch was very hungry. Sitting in the shed, Peter Crouch was thinking that when Tom would return, Mrs. Addis must give him supper, and at that time she must give him supper too, while serving her own son Tom. He was tired also. He began to doze in the shed. But he was roused by the sound of footsteps on the road. Children, come to the page number 47. For a moment, see the first line, for a moment his poor heart nearly choked him with his beating. They were the keepers. They had guessed where he was with Mrs. Addis, his old friend's mother. He had been a fool to come to the cottage, he thought. Nearly losing his self-control, he shrank into the corner, shivering, half sobbing. He's about to cry, but the footsteps went by. The cottage. The next minute, Mrs. Addis stuck her head into the shed and said very softly, That was the keepers. I saw them go by. They had lanterns. Maybe it would be better if you slipped out now and went towards Canciran. You'd miss them that way and get over to Kent. There's a London train that comes from Tunbridge Wells at 10 tonight. Mrs. Addis stuck her head into the shade and assured him that the keepers went by this place carrying lantern in hand. She encouraged him that it would be better if Peter slipped out now, means leave this place now, very first, and went towards Canciran. Canciran is the name of a town where there is a railway station. She suggested Peter Krause to get over to Kent to avoid these guards, and because they are in search for him, and she informed that there's a London train that comes from Tunbridge Wells at 10 o'clock tonight, and better Peter leave this place for his safety. Go from here. That was the message of Mrs. Addis to Peter Krause for the cause of his safety. Peter Krause said, "That would be a fine thing for me, madam, but I haven't the price of a ticket on me. I don't have money to buy the ticket even for the train." Mrs. Addis opened her kitchen drawers, hearing this, and got 7 shillings. Shillings means, children, British coins, and gave Peter that amount as train fare to London. A bit over. Some extra amount was also given apart from ticket fare. Peter Krause was very happy to receive that and said, "I don't know how to thank you, ma'am. I don't know the words to express my gratitude for you." Mrs. Addis told him, "You need not thank me, Peter. I am helping you for Tom, because Tom loves you as his friend. I do not want you to be in trouble. I want your safety. No one should know that you are in this cottage. That's why I am in a hurry to send you before Tom returns to home. If Tom brings any friend from the farm where he works with him, it would be very difficult for me to tackle the situation. Better you leave this place and go as early as possible." Then Mrs. Addis opened the door for him to go. But on the doorstep, they both stood still. You know why? They both heard of some footsteps again nearby the cottage, which were coming from the south. Mrs. Addis thought the footsteps might be of Tom, her son. "There's more than one man, and I can hear voices. Peter, you'd better go back. Wait there till they pass this road. Be inside the shed." Unwillingly, Peter went back into the little dusty shed. Mrs. Addis locked the door from outside. Children, come to the page number 48 now. The footsteps drew nearer. They came slowly and heavily this time. For a moment he thought they would pass also, but their momentary darling was only the crossing of the strip of grass outside the door. The next minute there was a knock. It was not Tom then. Mrs. Addis understood this knock is not made by Tom, because as a mother she knows the sound how Tom knocks at the door. Peter Krause, what happened to Peter Krause now hearing the knock at the door? There was a knock at the door, and again Peter Krause was fearful. He was trembling with anxiety and curiosity. What would happen to him? He fixed his eyes to one of the cracks in the door. He saw a man enter the cottage quickly and shut the door behind him. Peter Krause recognized that man. He was Biddler, one of the guards of Scotney Castle, a fort nearby the jungle. He felt very nervous. His hands, feet began to be cold. They must have traced him now, he thought. They had followed him correctly, he thought. They rightly had guessed that he had taken shelter in the cottage of Mrs. Addis. So many thoughts came to him. He began to blame him. Why did he come to Mrs. Addis's cottage? Why wasn't he intelligent enough to look after himself? His legs were shaking in nervousness. He sat down on the pile of sacks in the dusty shed. The man is Biddler, a keeper, a guard of Scotney Castle, and stood before Mrs. Addis silently, twisting his cap over his head. He was hesitating to speak. He had difficulty to speak. Mrs. Addis asked him, "Well, what is it? What is the reason of your arrival here in this night?" Bidler said, "Madam, I want to speak to you." Peter Crouch was overhearing the conversations from inside the shed. His heartbeats were sounding very loudly in fear of being caught up by him. But he was confident of Mrs. Addis that he was sure Mrs. Addis must not reveal them about his destination, about his stay in her house because of Tom's friendship with him. Mrs. Addis was very eager to know about this man's mind. But the man remained tongue-tied, means speechless. Then he said, "Madam, I have brought bad news for you." Mrs. Addis was tensed up. "Bad news? What? What is it? What the bad news is? Tell me. It is not about my Tom, no? Not about my Tom, no? Is it?" Bidler said, "He's outside." "What do you mean?" said Mrs. Addis, and she moved the door. Bidler said, "Please, madam, do not go out now." Mrs. Addis appealed to him. "Please tell me what the bad news is. You brought for me a bad news. What is that? Be quick, man. For mercy's sake, please be kind to me. Please be quick. Tell me first what the bad news is. Tell me the bad news. Please, you do tell me." She tried to push past him to the door to see outside. Children, now page number 49. See this part. Bidler began to say calmly, "There's been a row. There's been a row," he said, "down by cinder wood. There was a chap there snaring rabbits, and Tom was walking with the Boormans and me and Old Crouch. We heard a noise, and there it was too dark to see who it was, and directly he saw us, he made off. But we had scared him, and he let fly with his gun." "Tom," said Mrs. Addis. Bidler said that I was walking with Boormans, madam. Old Crouch was with us in Cinderwood Forest, and Tom was also with us. There was a chap, a man was there who was trying to catch rabbits in the wood. We were chasing him. Suddenly, we heard a noise. It was a very quick dark night. We could not identify the person. We could not see the man. We could not catch him. He ran away quickly. We scared him. He left his gun in fear." Mrs. Addis screamed out, "Tom!" She opened the door very fast. The men outside were waiting, and they came in carrying something what they put down in the middle of the kitchen floor. Mrs. Addis saw her son, her loving son, Tom. She is without tears. She asked, "Is he dead?" The man nodded, meant yes, he is no more. By this time, Peter Crouch overheard all the words, overheard the whole pace of conversation. He stopped to sweat and tremble due to nervousness. He began to regret for his work. He felt ashamed of his wrong deed. He himself did not know it was Tom who he shot at. He began to repent. "Oh, Tom, and I was thinking it was one of the keepers. Oh, Tom, I did this to you, my friend. And it you that got it from me. I don't want to live." He was in deep sorrows, knowing about his loving friend's demise. He lost his wish to live anymore. Now, children, come towards the end of page number 49. And yet, life was sweet. For there was a woman at Ticehurst, a woman as faithful to him as Tom. who would go with him to the world's end even now. But he must not think of her. He had no right. He must pay with his life for what he had done. Children, a lady loved Peter Crouch very much. And this lady also could sacrifice for him. And she was very faithful, very trustworthy as Tom to Peter Crouch. But Peter Crouch is very sad and is full of repentance for his wrong deed. He's thinking that he has no right to think of his own comfort, own happiness. He must pay with his life for what he had done. He became very much negative in his life. Peter Crouch felt very much sad for Mrs. Addis, this loving mother. Mrs. Addis lived in that cottage with her son Tom. Tom is killed by him, Peter Crouch. So he was very sad. Children, please feel the pain of this mother. Feel her sufferings. This mother lost her only son. One of the men helped Mrs. Addis to sit into the old armchair by the fire. She is without tears. She has turned into stone. She is overwhelmed with sorrows for losing her son. The people thought of calling Mrs. Gain, a lady from Iron Latch Cottage, to come down to Mrs. Addis to give her company in her mournful state, in her distress. These people did not want Mrs. Addis to be alone in this time. Someone should console her, they thought. The keeper said, "We know, madam, this is a terrible shock for you. It is an unbearable shock for you. We have a good guess who the man is, and he shall hang. He will be hanged for his offense for this heinous crime. We did not see this man's face, it's right, but we have got his gun. He threw it into a bush while escaping. That gun belongs to Peter Crouch." Page number 50. Please turn over page number 50. But he did not have known it was Tom when he did it. He and Tom always being better friends than he deserved. See this paragraph. Peter Crouch was standing upright now, looking through the crack of the door. He saw Mrs. Addis struggle to her feet and stand by the table, looking down on the dead man's face. He saw her put her hand into her apron pocket where she had thrust the key of the shed. Mrs. Addis, what is being done by her now? It is noticed by Peter Crouch from the cracks, one of the cracks of the wall. Peter Crouch saw Mrs. Addis was trying to stand looking down on her dead son's face painfully. He saw her put her hand into her apron pocket where she kept the key of the shed. Bidler broke the silence nervously and told her, "The Burmans went to search for Peter Crouch outside. Madam, you haven't seen him tonight, have you?" Mrs. Addis nodded, wanted to mean no. She requested the men to carry her son to the bedroom door. The men picked up the stretcher and carried Tom's dead body into the next room. Then silently, each wrung the mother by the hand. They held her hands together and twisted them in a way that expressed their deep concern about her when they could not change the situation. These persons went away silently. Mrs. Addis waited till they went and shut the door. Then she came towards the shed. Peter Crouch once more fell a shivering. But this shivering is due to sorrows, due to pains, due to his guilty conscience. How to show his face to this mother? Rather to be hanged than face Mrs. Addis, he thought. Mrs. Addis unlocked the shed. She did not come in, she just unlocked the door from outside, then crossed the kitchen with a heavy, dragging, means tired footsteps, and shut herself in the room where her dead son was lying. Children, last paragraph. Peter Crouch knew what he must do. The only thing he wanted him to do, the only thing he could possibly do. He opened the door and silently went out. Peter Crouch could not talk to Mrs. Addis. He opened the door and silently went out of the cottage. With his lots of sorrows, he went out with the expression of gratitude, with the expression of gratefulness, with the message of thanks. He went out of the cottage. Children, this is the tragic end of the story. A mother lost her son, only son, and gave safety to the killer of the son. Children, this is the tragic end of the story. This is the story of a kind mother who knows to forgive. This is the story of a noble mother who knows to bear her grief-stricken heart. This is the story of a great mother who knows to love her child truly. Regards to all the mothers on the earth. Children, remember, forgiveness is an attribute, a great quality of human beings. And remember, forgiveness provides opportunity to change the behavior. Thank you for your patient hearing. See you with my new video. Till then, bye. Have a nice time.